welcome back to another episode of Life, Death, and Cookies. I'm Oliver Tanner.
And I'm Char Tanner. And today we're talking about grieving, or lack thereof, of an estranged parent.
Or a strange parent.
Yes.
Sometimes, usually it's both.
This is something that actually both Oliver and I have a little bit of experience with, and from the research that I've done is that it's far more common than we realize, unfortunately. And I found that it's true as we've gotten older, talking to other people, that relationships are complicated. So I think the first thing that we'll talk about just a little bit is that just like in any grieving process, that there can be a myriad of feelings that you'll come across when grieving, and there's no should. And we know that it's not, grieving may actually be the wrong word when it comes to an estranged parent.
Well, I think I think grieving is an appropriate word. There's just a lot of other stuff mixed in there, and it's not, I don't think it's the same experience that, at least what I think is typical of other people.
Yeah, you don't know what that is.
No, I don't know what that is. But it's not what I hear people say. Like on social media, people will talk about their parent passing away, or they'll talk about missing their mom or their dad who died so many years ago.
Or they wish they were here in this moment.
Right. And, the kind of things that people express, it just doesn't... Yeah, it's not the same as what people at least project and what I assume is normal, if there is such a thing. Yeah,
so some common feelings that in common is whatever. You may have them, you may not. Sorrow for what you never had. So, as far as what a parent-child relationship should be, and you are sad that you never had that. So that's a true grieving thing. You may feel relief, and you may feel bad about that, or you may feel guilt for not feeling sad. Those are just some of the common ones, and we're going to talk about, the kind of our process and feelings because both of us have had an estranged parent pass away.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think maybe, is there anything that we should talk about before we get into your story, or?
Not, I don't think so.
Because I think some, as we talk about these feelings and of course, you probably have your own feelings, or do not look forward. Because I know that for you have this thing. It's your dad's death was years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a lot tied up into my feelings about when my dad died. So, just so everybody watching knows, my dad died last December. So December of 2021. Yeah, it was a difficult thing, but I don't feel like it was difficult for the reasons that people generally think a parent's death is difficult. There was a lot of history tied in with it. I've talked about how I've written some some memoirs. Let's use that. 3 memoirs that basically act as an autobiography for me. And right now, so I've published 2. The first one is called Blessed. The second one is called Cursed. And the third one is called One, but it is not released quite yet. I'm working on finishing it up right now. And so hopefully we'll be able to have that published by this summer. And I talk a lot about all of this in that book as well. I mention the books because there's a lot of history with there. And in the books I talk about the complicated relationship with my parents. They were very abusive. My dad was a malignant narcissist, really bad. I tried everything I could to help them. And so when he died, a lot of that grief was grief over what could have been, and it never was because of stubbornness, or I don't know exactly what it was. Things could have been much better than they were.
Yeah, because, I was talking to a friend actually this week that she actually has had, she had some abuse growing up when she was younger, and they actually, I was preparing for this episode, asking her, how was it when your dad died? Because I know she talks negatively about those things, but she also has talked positively about her dad. And, there's complicated things. I have a lot of positive things to say about my dad as well. But they actually went through a point where they, he never became perfect, of course. They had a time soon before he was going to die. I'm not sure what he was diagnosed with or what the deal was, but she was saying, that they got really close and they mended their relationship. And so she actually did grieve him in a normal parent-child way. Well, yeah, she said became like her best friend.
Right.
Towards the end of his life. And even though she had abuse in the very early stages of her life, and things progressively got better as he tried to be a better dad. And
right. And I think part of it for me also was part of all of this, and okay, spoiler for book 1, my parents disowned me while I was serving a mission for our church, and that incident itself was more traumatic than I can really explain to anyone. I don't think anybody would ever really understand it, to tell you the truth. But that one incident, my parents called me up on a few days before Christmas to tell me I had no home, don't bother coming home, nobody there cared about me, nobody there loved me, anything, all this stuff, really horrible things. And for me, that was kind of the day that both of my parents died. In a way, it was kind of the death of, I don't know, I've tried to frame it in my mind over and over through the years. I don't know if it was my parents died or the hope of parents who actually cared about me at all. Maybe that was what died. In a lot of ways, I felt like it was the day that I died. I don't know. It's a weird, complicated thing. So, but, I kind of felt like after that, the natural affection that children have for their parents, kind of the thinking of your parents as mommy and daddy, mom and dad, people who care about me. No matter what happens in life, my parents still love me. That was gone. So that has been gone for years and years. So when my dad died, it wasn't like there was this relationship to miss. It's not like I ever really had, like, I don't know, I see people talk on social media about, oh, I wish my dad were here. I miss my talks with him. I miss his advice, loving guidance, all that, whatever. None of that makes any sense to me because none of it is part of my experience. But see, with my dad, it's difficult because the fact of the matter is I never looked up to him. Not really. I didn't ever want to be anything like him because as far back as I can remember, he has always been a monster. And he has always been the last person in the world who I ever wanted to end up even the tiniest bit like.
Yeah, but even throughout, so there was one time back in 2012 that you thought that he had diabetes.
Right.
And there was, back in 2012, you thought he might die. And then again, when we got about 2 months before he died,
Yeah, so he was in the hospital. They had determined that he was getting less than 10% circulation through his arteries, veins, I guess all of the circulatory system. So he was getting about less than 10% circulation. He was doing pretty bad. He was in the hospital. And there were some people who were thinking that, and at the time I was thinking, maybe my dad might be headed out the door. And, I had tried writing to my parents many times over the years to help them to put their family back together because they had completely destroyed their family. So I felt like, okay, you know what? He's in the hospital. His health is failing. Maybe now he'll be actually receptive to listening. And so I felt like, you know what? Maybe I should try. And so I did. I went to the hospital. I wrote a letter, and I went to the hospital to deliver it myself. My plan was to go, deliver the letter, read it out loud if I could. And my expectation was he was going to throw a fit, that he was going to get really angry, and things were going to get ugly. He was going to call hospital security and have me removed. So I was really surprised when that is not exactly how things went. So he actually let me finish speaking. He gave a sort of a feeble half apology, but it was more than I had ever heard escape his lips at any point during his life. And so from there in 2012, I kind of proceeded forward tentatively with my parents. So things did get to being maybe a little bit better.
But there was also, after that time, we had an inkling of hope as well.
Yeah, so there was a hope that maybe things might change. I never really had a great relationship with them. I had at best a polite relationship where it didn't feel like they were trying to hurt me the whole time. That was probably the best that it ever got, was just polite. Okay, so right now you're not actively trying to destroy my life. Then as we moved forward through this over the years, it became very clear that they didn't actually care about me. They were just trying to get to our kids. My parents were just, they wanted proximity to our kids, and, it felt like I was just getting played again. And so we actually cut it off with them at the end of 2019. So a couple years before he died. And that's kind of where things were. I don't know how far you want me to go into this. You want me to talk about October, or?
Just what I was kind of looking for, yes, you established that contact again in 2012, right. But it wasn't about having your mommy and daddy back necessarily.
No, it wasn't. It was about, and that wasn't, and that was one thing that they misunderstood. They thought that I was there begging them to come back into my life. I was not even close. I didn't need them in my life. I was perfectly happy not having them in my life. They did not bring positive things into my life. And even when contact was reestablished, it's not like they brought much of anything positive into it anyway. So, no, it was not about me looking for my mommy and my daddy. It wasn't about me trying to get my parents or me begging for them to come back into my life. It was about me trying to help them. And that was the thing that I kept trying to make clear to them the whole time. This is about me trying to help you. And, we're going to get into forgiveness a little bit later, but that is a large part of what forgiveness means to me. It means not that you have to go and be best friends or even hang out with people, but that you sincerely desire for the best for them, and you try to help achieve the best. And so for me with my parents, forgiving them meant try to help them to put their family back together. Well, also, there were other things, and we'll probably get into that in later episodes. I have a lot to say on it, enough to write 3 books. So yeah, I need to cut myself off here, or believe me, I will go on for 3 books length. And even then, I cut a lot out of those books. So I could probably write endless volumes more.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I think that's a good, like, as we talk about different feelings, I think that's probably not a huge feeling that most people will have of, that have an estranged parent when they're dying, oh, I want to help them. I mean,
right.
So that's just a good idea, a good illustration of how many different feelings there can be out there, right? And you did basically the same thing in October before he died. We went back.
Yeah.
Basically one last.
Yeah, we went back to try to visit with them one last time because it became very clear last October that he really was actually on his way out. The expectation was that he had a few weeks to live. I think my mother miscommunicated, I guess we should say, the depth of his condition, because I think she was trying to lure people to come back.
And a few people...
They've got this whole delusional thing that they've had for years, and I think they were trying to get people to validate their delusion. A few people had gone back, I went back, and the long and short of it is, we went to try to visit with my parents, and they would not allow it. They wouldn't even see me. We made them a meal, and we went to their house, and they would not even answer the door. And so we left a meal on their doorstep, and that was it. That was my last contact with... And, one of the craziest things is that I never even I never texted or spoke or anything with my father the entire time. Everything was through my mother. So was he really the one who didn't want to see me, or was it really just her? And I really have a lot of reasons why I think it may have been
because they
almost entirely her.
Yeah, because they let all the other. There weren't a lot. Some of your siblings.
Some of them showed up kind of unannounced and surprise. We're here. I didn't want to have any reason for them to think that I had pulled a fast one on them or done anything wrong. I wanted to do everything on the up and up. Be respectful, be honest. Those are all things that are very important to me. And so I wanted to do it honestly. I contacted them ahead of time. I said, hey, we're in town. We'd like to come by for a visit. And things kind of went downhill from there.
Yeah.
And kind of culminated in me just telling them, you know what? I'm not going to get into arguments. We're not going to fight over texting or any of this nonsense. It was kind of me realizing the game that my mother was playing and deciding to not play by her rules, not fight on a battlefield of her choosing, but to pick my own battles and approach things in my own way, on my own ground. And so I said, you know what? Here's what is going to happen. We are going to show up at your house with a meal. We are going to prepare this meal with love, and we are going to prepare this meal specifically and specially for you. And at that time, you can choose what you do. But, we chose what we were going to do, and we proceeded accordingly to what we were going to do. I wasn't going to let her dictate my reactions, basically.
So do you have, I know we talked about we'd like to do an episode in the future on regrets, so maybe you don't want to get too much into that, but do you have any regrets from it?
Any regrets? I regret that things did not turn out better. I do not regret. I don't think I really regret anything that I did. There may have been a few times that I maybe got a little bit too passionate with some of my talking with my parents, but I don't necessarily regret it because I said a lot of things that they needed to hear. And I never did anything out of spite. I never did anything out of hatred. I never did anything because I wanted to get back at them. My motives, one thing I can say about myself is I kept my motives pure the whole time through all my interactions with them. And so, no, I don't regret anything. I don't regret anything that I did or how I did it, really. I don't know that I'm necessarily proud of any of it, but I don't regret it. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody.
Okay, so anything else you want to say about your story before I get into mine?
So I will just talk a little bit about, I don't know, do we want to talk about my dad's funeral yet, or wait for that?
I don't know. Let's wait and see.
Okay. So yeah, my dad's funeral, that was a whole different thing.
Yeah, those feelings, I had strong feelings. We didn't go to the funeral. I mean, I guess that's the one blessing.
We watched the funeral on Zoom.
That's the one blessing of COVID, right?
Yeah.
Everything went digital at that.
Yeah. It was, my dad's funeral was, I don't swear, but I guess the clean version would be a crap show, poop show. Yeah, it was pretty bad, but we'll talk more about that later, I guess.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, talk about your dad.
Okay, so my situation's quite a bit different in that up until probably I was 16, it started getting rocky probably around 14, but I had a really good relationship with my dad. He was like my best friend. Things at home were, I was oblivious or naive or I don't know what, but even though there was crap going around, and I don't want to, I'm not really comfortable with talking a lot about the details of my home life, but my dad was one of my best friends, and I talked to him like when I had boyfriend troubles and friend troubles, I would talk to him, and there was this, I'd say it's an incident. It was actually probably a string of incidents, but one incident that made me, basically like you were saying, where I felt like the dad that I knew died. I felt like everything that I knew about my dad was a lie. And so the dad that I knew died, and I was about 16 or 17 when that happened. I don't remember exactly. But when my dad got pancreatic cancer, when we saw him every once in a while from that time. But
so your parents split up then,
yes,
right?
my parents divorced, and it just so happened it was like right before, I don't know if we talked about it, right before we got married, so that was kind of like traumatic. But so fast forward, I don't know, I guess I don't know.
All right, hold on, I'm gonna pause you right there, because you said it was right before we got married, but we didn't get married when you were 16 or 17.
Okay, so the incident happened, but they didn't get divorced.
Look, guys, I was not looking for 16 or 17-year-olds. Okay, I'm trying to save my own skin here right now. Well, and yours a little bit too, I guess.
So the incident happened when I was 16 or 17, but my parents didn't get divorced until right before we got married.
All right. Did they get separated right at that time, 16 or 17?
Yes.
Okay, so they were separated for like 2 years before the divorce was finalized.
Yeah, year and a half, I don't.
Okay.
I'm sure my two younger siblings could tell you, could tell you the exact amount of time. But I was just living my life, so I kind of just, I went off on my own when that all happened. And
so did you just kind of tune it all out?
Yeah. My two younger siblings, they went with my mom, and I just stayed at our house with my dad. We didn't ever really talk or anything. I just, like I said, I graduated early from high school. I was going to college. And so I did my college, my work, my friend thing, and I was basically living it up, but
basically just doing your own thing.
Yeah.
And he didn't stop you from doing whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
You just kind of did whatever you wanted and lived your life however you felt.
Thankfully, I'm a good kid and didn't get in trouble. So, but yeah,
That's debatable. Just kidding.
Fast forward to, I don't know how many years later, we're living in Tucson at the time, so I could probably do the math if I planned it out. Anyway, so my dad has pancreatic cancer, and when he found out, he had like basically 6 months. We went Vacaville, for my brother's wedding, and my dad was there at the wedding, and then I think he died like 2 weeks later. But anyway, in that time, he got an extension for leave because my dad was dying, and so I guess this is probably a thing. So like I don't know if it was all my siblings or if it was just most of us, because there's 8 of us, and we all went to my dad's house with his new wife. I don't know, I guess they were married for 4 years. I don't know. I didn't really have much to do with them. So we're there at their house, and my dad's not at this point not talking anymore. He could talk a little bit at my brother's wedding, but it progressed a lot within those 2 weeks. He was in bed all the time now, and you didn't come with me, or were you in another room?
I don't know if I was there. I think I might have been taking care of the kids.
Yeah, that's probably it. So probably just all my siblings were there, and everyone else. It was like I think this was planned. I don't know. I have a bad memory. So
all I know is that I didn't really want to be there, and I told you, if you want me to be there, then I will. Otherwise, it's not a thing that I really want to be there for. I don't know. There were a lot of, conflicting ideas and thoughts and feelings between siblings, and I think that I felt like maybe it would just be best if I stayed away. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure that
I don't think there were any of the other spouses there either. So I think it was just like my mom was there, even though she's the ex-wife. And this was like the goodbye. I don't remember how it was all set up. And so like everyone went through and was like saying their goodbye. I don't know what anyone said. I remember some of the stuff my mom said, and I was like, anyway, that's a whole nother story. But and then I
was like, anyway.
So before I'll talk about this. I'll finish the story, and then I'll talk about what I was going to talk about from this book. I wasn't planning on saying anything. I was just there feeling like I was being supportive of my siblings. That's why I was there.
Right.
I hadn't talked to I said hi to my dad at my brother's wedding. Other than that, I hadn't talked to him in years, and so I was there mainly to be supportive of my siblings. But then I had one of my siblings say, "Okay, all this is blurry. I remember my feeling, and I was not happy. Like, they had me get down. They're like, say whatever you want to say to him. Of course, he can't respond back, and his wife was kind of responding, like speaking for him. I guess you don't know because you weren't there, but
right.
Like what she thinks that he would have said, or what she wanted to, I don't know. It was.
That sounds weird.
I don't think it sounds weird. I think if we were in.
No, maybe, and this may just be that gap of lack of experience or whatever,
I don't think it's weird. Yeah, I think that if we know that I'm gonna die. I probably won't get to the point where I'm not talking, but I think that if someone came to see me and I'm dying, I'm not talking anymore, that you might say, oh, you know what, Char really loved you, and I bet if she could say, she would really appreciate that you're here right now. That it was that type of thing. You still think that's weird?
No, I guess. I just think that you'd probably just sign if you couldn't talk.
Yes, but
either that or I'd speak for you, and then you'd either give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or I don't know.
Anyway, so it was my turn that I didn't want to turn. And I had a sister coaxing me, and I think she even said, give him a hug, and he's laying in bed, and I'm like, I don't want to touch him, and this is, like, my experience with death, too. Like, when he actually died, I didn't go to the casket. I was like most people at that time, death, no, this is not cool.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to touch him. I had these feelings, and she was, like, coaxing me on what to say, like, say you love him, and I think I said those things. I'm still, as you can tell, I was upset then, and I don't remember, and I'm not upset at my sister. I love my sister. She was just, she had mended her relationship with
right.
And she wanted it, she wanted to make sure that I didn't regret anything, right?
So do you feel like she was trying to help you or trying to help her?
Oh, I don't know. I don't remember enough I just remember the feeling that I had. That's all the most thing that I remember is the feeling that I had that I did not want to be doing this. And I don't think I would have regretted not doing it.
Yeah.
So, like, recently I had someone contact me saying, can you talk to my daughter, or my friend's daughter, and she doesn't want to invite her mom to her wedding. And I said, I don't think I didn't invite my dad to our wedding.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it.
Yeah.
I know I have siblings out there that wouldn't agree with me, and people out there that'd be like, what? That's 21 years ago, and I still don't regret it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm not the best person to try and help your daughter convince her that she should have her mom there, because I would be willing to say you might regret it, because I'm sure there's people out there that would, but I'm laying my cards out here, and
everybody's going to be different. Every case is going to be different, and talking about inviting parents to weddings, I did invite my parents to our wedding, but the way I did it was I called up my mother on the phone and I said, look, if you can be there with nothing but love in your heart, if you can be there to support us, and if you can be there without malice and without any of these things, then you are welcome to come. If you cannot, then you are not welcome to come. And so I kind of, I set the conditions upon which they would be welcome. I made it clear that if they could meet these basic conditions, then they would be welcome. And then I left it to them to decide. I realize that does not work in every situation. And with your dad, I don't think it would have worked, because it was just a very different situation. And, in experiences after that, your dad still tried to, your dad did have a strong manipulative streak in him. Mm-hmm. And he tried to use some things to manipulate us later on, which played a big role in why I didn't particularly like him very much. And I did not like him up until the day he died, because of your history that I knew about with him, and because of my own short history with him.
I wasn't happy about it, and so I read this book last year called 4 Things That Matter Most by Byock. I don't know how to say his name, but
it looks like Byock, Byock.
Anyway,
you decide how that's pronounced, because it looks like Byock or Byock or I don't know.
Yeah, so he presents in his book, he works with, I think he's been like a palliative palliative care and
I was way
hospice. Hospice. He's a doctor, and he's worked in hospice and palliative care, I believe. Anyway, so he's come up with these 4 things that, you know, through talking to so many people through death and all that, that everyone should say to someone that is dying, and it's please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, and I love you. Reading this book, there's wonderful stories in it, and I totally agree with it for the most part. I think that this will create, and we'll talk about this more in other episodes, because I think it's a really good book and really needs, you know, and we're going to talk a little bit about forgiveness in this episode as well. He claims it should be done in every death if possible, even those that have been an estranged parent. And there were some great stories that he presented of it worked really well. It went on for the child left behind to be able to go on to actually forgive and to not have this hate inside. And this is essentially what my sister was wanting me to do with my dad. You know, she hadn't read the book, but it's the same type of thing. Like, I love you, you know, say whatever last words you want to say. But as I was reading this book, I was like, I don't think this applies to me. And later I thought about it, and I was like, well, maybe if I read the book before my dad died, and that I would have felt differently. Or maybe if I had ever confronted him, and actually, I just felt like going and saying I love you and I forgive you. I don't know if I've actually haven't been self-aware enough to have I forgiven my dad? I don't know. But at that time, I did not want to say it. And I don't know if I feel like I guess my only regret is that I never told him what the space was, why was our relationship like that? I mean,
well, you know, one of the rubrics that I've heard people use for determining if you have forgiven someone is kind of the idea of, you know, what if you got to heaven and whoever this person is that you have a need to forgive, and what if that person was there? So if you got to heaven, Char, and your dad was there, how would you feel, right? And a lot of times when people give these kinds of tests to people, kind of the assumption is that the person is going to go, oh, well, that piece of crap, I mean, if he's there, then I don't want to be there, right? And then the answer is, well, you see, you still haven't forgiven. I feel like a lot of times this example is kind of given almost in a manipulative and diminutive way to people. I don't know. If you went to heaven, honestly, how would you feel? If you went to heaven and your dad was there, would you be upset? Would you be happy? What would you feel?
I think I would feel, I don't think I would be upset. I wouldn't be like, oh, I don't want to be here with them. I think my understanding of heaven and is similar to yours is like, oh yeah, you know, and another thing for me is I love my dad from before all this happened. I miss that dad. You know, I can have conversations with my siblings about the things that I miss and that I loved about my dad, and I think, yeah, if I saw him, I think I would be happy to see him.
Okay. But
I don't regret how not inviting him to our wedding. I don't regret that I didn't want to say these things to him. I don't know. I'm selfish. I'm like totally, you all are going to think I'm a horrible person.
It's okay. I already do. Just kidding.
But I think I do regret that I never said what the problem was, and I was always too scared to talk to him about any of it. So maybe I could have had a better experience if I would have done that, and then I maybe could have said, you know what, and I think maybe I should have said thank you at that time, you know, because there are things I'm thankful for about my dad, and I do love him. I am feeling like I want to move on from
Okay.
See, it's all complicated. I know there's people out there that get me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all complicated. My dad, yeah, he was a good dad to me.
Okay. That's good enough.
Yeah. So this kind of leads us on to our response. We said we'd talk about forgiveness.
Right.
And forgiveness, a lot of times we think, oh, forgiveness is for the person. You know, some of your siblings did go and say, I forgive you. Mm-hmm. And your dad rejected it.
Right.
But they got that closure because they felt like they were handing off that pain and that responsibility to them, to your parents. And so...
Well, you know, with my dad and his situation, the response that came up when they went and they said, I forgive you, his response was, forgive me for what? Right? And it was kind of almost a how dare you be so audacious as to forgive me. I've never done anything that I need to be forgiven for. Right? And then my mother, she's, you know, when I've tried talking with her about it, her response has always been, oh, well, you know what? I don't need anything from you for me to be forgiven by God. Right? I think it all reflects a really, really, really poor understanding of forgiveness, what it's for, who it's for, and what it's all about. And forgiveness, repentance, all of it. Yeah, I don't know. Should I go on?
I mean, I think we've probably gone on long enough in this episode, but I think the forgiveness thing, you know, even...
Well, let me just finish up with, if we're going to be wrapping up soon, because I feel like I'm leaving people on a bit of a hanger here, right? So the forgiveness, it's not for my parents. Look, my parents... they need to get forgiveness from God. So repentance is about getting forgiveness from God, right? It's not about getting forgiveness from other people necessarily, right? And there's a whole process to all of that. And it's a whole lot more than, oh, hey, God, sorry about that, my bad, right? So it goes deeper than that. And we can get more into that some other time. But for today, you know, that forgiveness that I had for my parents, that forgiveness that my siblings have for my parents, it really has nothing to do with whether they have repented, because it isn't... Look, I can't extend my parents God's forgiveness, right? I can only extend them my forgiveness. I'm not taking away, and I don't have the power to take away, any deficit that they may have with God. That's a whole different issue. Even reconciliation is a totally different thing than repentance or forgiveness, all that stuff, okay? Me forgiving my parents, which I put a lot of effort into doing while I was on my mission. When I was first writing to them and telling them that they needed to stop abusing their family, they needed to change how they were doing things, and warning them really that if they didn't, then they were going to destroy their families and they were going to regret it later on. I worked a lot to forgive them back then, and I worked to maintain that forgiveness for them. And what that was a removal in myself of the hatred and the anger and the animosity that I may have felt for them. So forgiving them really doesn't have anything to do with what they do or what they say or if they ask for my forgiveness or any of that. Okay, that's all a totally separate thing. Me forgiving them is about me taking the ugliness and the pain and saying, you know what? I'm not going to carry this anymore. Instead, the love that I had for my parents, like a mommy and daddy, and that was gone. That died on my mission. And so what I had left, the only thing I really had left, the only way I could move forward with that was to try to have a Christ-like love for them, where I wished for the best for them, and I tried to help them achieve the best that could be achieved in their lives. And that is something that I feel confident I can say I did to the absolute best of my ability over the course of more than 23 years until my father passed away. There were times when I had anger. There are times even now that I think about things and I'm upset, right? I'm angry, and then I try and let it go. And really the thing that angers me most now is just that they would give up every chance and let it all go away and never do anything to improve their family. And it's anger, it's sadness, it's all these kinds of things mixed together. But the forgiveness is about me wishing the best for them. And so, I put you on the spot, asked you that question, what if you met your dad in heaven? And so now I'm going to put myself on the spot. What if I met my dad in heaven? How would I feel? Because I've, in my quest to forgive my parents, I've put myself in this position many times. And the honest truth is that all I ever wanted from my parents was for them to fix things and to actually go through the repentance process. And here's the thing. If I go to heaven and I meet my dad there, then that will be evidence enough for me that he has actually done the work and he's done the whole process, and I'll be happy to see him. That's all I ever really wanted from him. And if I meet my parents in heaven, then I'll be happy to see that they're there. And that is not just words, that is really, truly how I feel about it.
Well, I think it's important, though, that even if you're not religious, you need to go through being
right.
forgiving.
And I realize, yes, that test applies to people who believe in God. If you don't believe in God, then you're kind of like, well, what do I do now? All right, I don't know what scenario to give you. Maybe pretend you believe in God for a minute. If there was a place like heaven and you went there, how would you feel? Maybe that can, I don't know. I don't know how to help.
But the key is to, you don't have to have that test necessarily to know.
Right. It's just
getting rid of that hate and anger so that you can move forward and be happy in your life.
Right. And, that test, it's just kind of a way to conceptualize it. So, and I'm sure there's other ways. Feel free to comment on this podcast what other ways you have of conceptualizing. Or, if you want to tell me that I'm a monster because you don't think I ever forgave, or I'm full of hate, or whatever, you can comment that too. I don't care. Comment whatever you want to comment.
Or what obstacles you're encountering to feeling that peace of forgiveness. That's...
Or questions about, I don't know, I'd love to hear other people's experiences, other people's obstacles, kind of how other people have dealt with this. I can only tell you how I've dealt with it, and I can't any way guarantee that the way that I did it is the right way. It's just the way that I've felt has been the right way. And I really have done my best throughout the years, regardless of situations, regardless of relationships, regardless of what has been done to me, to always do my best to act honorably, to act honestly, and to do what is right. And that's why, we said at the beginning, I said at the beginning, I don't have regrets. That's why I don't have regrets. Because I know that I always have tried to act unselfishly, tried to act as honorably as possible, and tried to do what I feel and know is right.
Yeah, so I don't know if that helps anyone, or if it just gives you, it can hopefully give somebody some...
Well, what I would say that I think can be helpful with people, whatever your situation with your parents is, whatever your personal situation may be, always be honest. Always be true to yourself. Always do what you know is right, even if it's hard, even if it scares the living daylights out of you, even if it may mean that you lose everything, which is what happened to me. I was disowned, I lost my home, I lost my family, I lost everything. But it's not about what happens to me. It's about what I do. It's about how I live. And I'm responsible for me. At the end of the day, I am responsible for me, and I have to live with myself. And you have to live with yourself. And so do what's right. If you act out of selfishness, you're probably going to regret it later on. There's going to be some point in time when you're going to regret it. Things are going to backfire. Don't act out of spite. Do what's right and be honorable in all cases. And I think that's the counsel that I would give you, to be able to look back later and live without regrets. I'm big on living without regrets. I hope that helps somebody. I don't know. And it's not easy always doing that at all. A lot of times it probably means that you're going to suffer as a result of doing the things that you feel and know are right. Because there are going to be people who don't get it. There are going to be people who don't understand. And there are going to be people who malign you and who even use it all to say all kinds of nasty, horrible things about you, things that aren't true, because they don't get it.
Yeah, and I just think it's also important that, as we talk about this forgiveness and, if you're facing your estranged parent hasn't died yet or whatever, and you're facing, should I go, should I stay, you also need to be cognizant of, and also maybe they're not dying, and, we might talk about this too in the future, people tell you, to forgive, you have to have a relationship. You also need to make sure that you're not putting yourself in danger. You're not putting your children in danger. And being your best self as well for your family.
It's important to not become the monster who you have a problem with. It's important to, sometimes there are these chains of negativity that go from one generation to the next, and it's important to break that chain. It's important to say, you know what, this ends here and it ends with me. And there are some negative things that you will never really be able to fully rid yourself of, especially like in my case. I grew up with a malignant narcissist and a covert narcissist as my parents. Okay, there is no possible way that I was not going to take anything from them, any of their negative traits, because they were my parents. They did raise me. I can try to counteract that as much as I can, but the simple fact of their parentage and my being their son is a thing that I cannot change, no matter how much I may want to. You just need to try to recognize all of those negative things and stop them with yourself. You don't need to be them. You don't need to take those things on to the next generation. And that's where I say always be honest, always be true. And I think that really one of the biggest things, and maybe it's just because my parents were narcissists, and so maybe that's why it's such a big thing for me, but selfishness. Rid yourself of any and all forms of selfishness. If your own interest is your motivation for anything, any number of things, then I would say maybe you should rethink that direction. Maybe you should rethink why you're doing that. If you're talking about your own, if it feels good to you to get back at them, there were plenty of times when, it would have felt really good to own my parents. Or I remember as a child, like having these thoughts sometimes like, oh man, when I'm older and I'm bigger, I'm going to come back and I'm going to beat the crap out of my dad. And that'll feel so good. And, you know, I got older, I got bigger. I probably could have taken on my dad at some point, but if I had, it would have just been a selfish thing, really. It would have made me feel good in the moment, you know, in one way. And then afterwards, I would have regretted it. I would have hated myself for it. And I would have looked at myself negatively. And you know what? All of those kinds of things probably would have, those thoughts, negative thoughts about myself afterward, probably all would have been true. So it's important to get rid of that selfish motivation and do what's right regardless of whether the other person cares, recognizes any of it.
Well, I think we should get on to the cookies.
Yeah, let's have some cookies. I think we talked about some heavy stuff, and, you know, we're going to talk about a lot more of this stuff in future episodes. I think you can tell that both of us can probably talk your ears off forever, but we're going to try not to. Try, at least.
So today we have no-bake cookies that our daughter Lindy made. But these are a little bit different, right, than normal.
A little bit.
So I can taste the butterscotch in them. So
Yeah.
was it melted in?
People don't know how they're different. So we put butterscotch chips in them
But
right at the end. So, yeah, I told Lindy to put them in at the end when she was mixing it all together. And I think they did. I think they melted and mixed it.
yeah, because I was expecting to have chips in them. And so it's good. I like butterscotch, but I think I would have rather had the chips rather than the whole thing kind of taking over the flavor of...
Yeah, maybe you should have told her to wait until it cools down a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe if we would have put the butterscotch chips in the freezer.
But, yeah, so if you want to try butterscotch chips in your no-bake cookies,
Go for it.
let us know if you got it, made it work.
Yeah. Or chocolate chips.
Yeah. Well,
Or tortilla chips.
Well,
I would do those.
So I guess we should sign off for now. Those were good.
Yeah.
We already talked about things to comment on. Comment any other way, and
Yeah. We'd appreciate it. If you're new to this podcast, we'd appreciate if you could give our podcast a thumbs up, like it, subscribe. You know, if this is the first time listening, listen to what we've already put out. There's important background information, and we hope that you find something good in it. And if you do find something good in this, then we would love it if you would please share it.
thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. See ya.